Many times when I have students coming to me painting, having done a lovely painting of flowers, they'll come along having finished the flowers and then they'll say, what should I do for the background? Well, today, putting the background down first solves that problem. So I've got 4 washes mixed up, a very bright yellow, which is Aureolin. I've mixed Windsor Violet with a little bit of Payne's Grey for a background colour. Again, Windsor Violet with a little bit of ultramarine in it for the flower, and a green made with Payne's Grey and Aureolin. And then the first thing we're going to do is to wet the whole of the area that we're going to paint. So I'm using my favourite brush, which is the SAA Whopper. Great brush, holds a lot of water, has a great point on it as well. So you can do detailed work if you need to. So getting the paper nice and evenly wet. You don't want this standing in puddles. So we get it nice and evenly wet like that. And then I always start with the flower colour. So starting with the Windsor Violet, which just goes roughly over where the flower is. And don't worry if your drawing disappears for a little while, it should come back again. I'm then going to put the green on roughly where I need it, which is where the leaves and the stem are. And everything will run like mad, but don't panic, it'll be all right. Putting up some yellow up near the top, this is the Aureolin. Don't mix colours together too much with the brush, because that's the one way of ending up with a bit of mud. And then the last little bit that's going on is the Payne's Grey, with a bit of Windsor Violet in it, because Payne's Grey on its own is a very cold colour. Looks a bit bleak, so I like to introduce a bit of violet into it. So we just leave that like that to dry naturally. Okay, so now the painting is completely dry, and that's important to make sure that it really is properly dry. And I'm going to use the same colours that I mixed to start with. There's no need to make a colour any darker at this point. You'll be putting it now down on top of the colour that's already on the paper, and because watercolour is transparent, 2 layers will look darker than just one. So going back to the Windsor Violet mixture that I had for the flower to start with, I'm going to paint the flower all over with the same colour. And I can just see my drawing through still, so I'm going right over all the petals of the flower. Don't try to make separate petals at this stage of the painting, just treat the whole thing as a whole. And it's good to make your brush strokes go the way that the petals grow. So I always try and pull in towards the centre or work out from the centre, so that any brush strokes that do appear are appropriate and going the way the flower grows. Straight into the green for the stem. Don't wait for the top to dry, because it's quite nice if a bit of the purple runs into the green. That's quite strong, so I'm just going to use a bit of water and take that down the length of the stem, just letting it fade out at the bottom. And then we go in for the leaves here. So bits of green, and it's quite nice to vary the colour when you're painting leaves. So sometimes put a bit of yellow in, so that we get a slightly different shades, maybe a little bit of blue. Just creating different shades within the green makes it just seem a little bit more interesting than just going for one flat colour. And then again, I have to wait now for that to dry. Okay, so the flower is now dry, and I'm going to try now to make some of the petals separate from one another. Again, just use the same sort of colours again. I'm going to add a little bit more Windsor Violet into this to make it a little bit deeper. The idea is to make a counter change of light against dark and dark against light, so that the petals look separate from one another. But you don't want to end up with a stripy flower. So if we start with a dark where this petal goes underneath the one on the right, and then I'm going to use just a clean damp brush. I've rinsed it completely, and I'm just going to wipe it on the rag and just run that down the very edge, so that you gradually get it to fade across the flower. And keep repeating this. I might go back a little bit darker here, so we've got another petal coming in at that point. And then similarly with the petals that come in front, we just put another layer over the top. Perhaps add just a little bit more blue to my Windsor Violet to make it a little bit deeper down here, particularly underneath where the petals curl round. And then again I'm going to go down the stem with the green again so that we get a little bit of the purple running into the green coming down here. Maybe make my green a little bit darker, a bit more Payne's grey into the mixture. And sometimes just paint with a clean damp brush, but it's important just to wipe it on a rag rather than going in with a brush full of water, which will have kind of disastrous effects with watercolour. Get all those nasty backruns happening where you don't want them. And just take the green down a little bit further down the stem. And then again, a clean brush, and just pull that down there. And then again, we have to wait for it to dry. Okay, so now the flower is dry again. I think the petals are looking a little bit flat, so I'm just going to use a bit more of the Windsor Violet and try and get a few wrinkles and things into the petals. So again, just using a little bit of colour on the brush, and then rinse your brush. Don't introduce a lot of water, so take the excess off on a rag and just try working from the edge of where you've just been painting. Don't go back over with the whole area with the brush, or you'll end up making lots of brush marks that won't look attractive. And I'm definitely going to make this area here quite a bit darker. Similar idea around here, just one or two folds in the petals. If you leave them like that, they're going to look really hard, so soften off with a brush. And follow them right through into the centre. Everything in a flower radiates from the central point. So it's important that your brush strokes go in the right direction. Now I've also got some neutral tint which I've put out, which is going to go for the really dark centre of an anemone. You have like a little cushion in the middle. So I'm going to use that quite strong. And then again, a bit of damp brush and just pull that across the paper so that you get a little fading across and it looks like we've got a rounded shape in the middle. And then I'm going to change to a rigger and use the same neutral tint just to dot in some of the stamens, suggest those around the outside of this cushion in the middle. Try and make these as natural as you can. You don't want them looking as if they're all in straight rows. So they can be different sizes, and I find it best to do this quite quickly. If you think about it too much, they look a little bit mechanical. And my last little bit really is just to kind of differentiate these leaves from the rest of the stem. So I'm going to make the green a little bit darker with a bit more Payne's grey. Go in underneath where the leaves go just to put a bit of shadow. Fade that down the stem as before, and the same thing underneath the flower. A little bit of shadow under the flower kind of lifts the flower and it gives it a slightly three-dimensional feel to it. And that's your flower done. So I hope that gives you a good idea of how to use a wet in wet background behind the flower in the first place. You can use it with any flower colour at all. Just let the colours run around, let it dry, and when it has dried, you'll be able to see your pencil drawing and you can paint on top.